My roommate, Sophie, handed me a red envelope just after we left the women's health clinic. I knew what it was almost instantly, a piece of folk magic intended to transfer misfortune. So I took it, turned around, and offered it to the spirit of a particularly nasty character buried in the old cemetery. That very night, a man I couldn't see climbed into Sophie's bed. Clara, thank you so much for coming with me today. You have to take this. It's just a little something to show my appreciation, Sophie said, her voice a little too bright, as she stuffed the crisp red paper into my hand. We had just stepped out of the clinic's sterile-smelling lobby and into the gray afternoon. Before I could form a proper refusal, she was already flagging down a taxi. I have some things I need to take care of at home, so I can't walk back with you. With a quick, nervous wave, she slipped into the car and was gone, leaving me on the curb with the envelope feeling warm in my palm. I looked down at it, a mixture of irritation and a strange kind of amusement bubbling up inside me. My father isn't a wizard or a mystic, but he's a well-respected scholar of folklore and esoteric traditions in our region, and I've absorbed a great deal of his knowledge over the years just by being around him. I recognized the envelope for what it was supposed to be, an attempt to buy my good fortune or my life to offset a personal loss. To be sure, I turned it over. There, in the bottom right corner, written in minuscule red letters that were almost invisible against the background, were Sophie's exact date and time of birth. The use of red ink in such tiny script was a classic sign. If I hadn't known what to look for, I would have never seen it. I was left completely dumbfounded on the sidewalk. Sophie had found herself pregnant, and the moment she told her boyfriend, he had vanished as if he'd never existed. Terrified of her strict parents finding out, she had pleaded with me for days in our dorm room until I finally relented and agreed to accompany her to the clinic for the procedure. The poor girl must have been terrified of feeling weak and drained afterward. With final exams just around the corner, she was probably worried it would affect her performance and jeopardize the scholarship that she prized so much. So, she resorted to this obscure, desperate piece of magic to buy my vitality and speed up her own recovery. I simply couldn't believe it. I had tried to be a good friend and support her through a difficult time, and in return, she tried to pawn her misfortune off on me. And if you're going to try a ritual like that, you could at least have the decency to put some real money in it. I peeked inside. $200. Was she trying to fool me or some malevolent spirit? I let out a short, sharp laugh. I'm the daughter of a man who understands these things after all. If you want to play these kinds of games with me, you've definitely come to the right person. Without giving it a second thought, I hailed my own cab and gave the driver the address of the nearest cemetery. This kind of ritual doesn't just work by handing over the envelope. For the transaction to be complete, the person whose fortune is being bought has to willingly spend the money. I spent the rest of the afternoon wandering among the tombstones, the sun slowly sinking below the horizon until the world was bathed in shadow. Finally, I stopped and crouched in front of one particular grave. I had mentally reviewed the histories of many of the people buried here, and the man in this plot was the most suitable candidate. An old predatory scoundrel who, by all accounts, had lived a terrible life and was likely still paying for it in whatever comes next. He was the one. I pulled out the red envelope and a lighter. As the flame caught the corner of the paper, I murmured Sophie's birth date under my breath. "Hey, old man," I said to the headstone. "You probably don't know my friend Sophie, but she's had a thing for you since she was a little girl. You have no idea how much she cried when you passed. She was beside herself. So, she asked me to come here today and burn some spending money for you. This $200 isn't a lot, but she said it's the thought that counts. Spend it on whatever you like, and if you find yourself needing more, you know who to ask for." As the last of the envelope turned to gray ash and floated away on the breeze, I stood up, dusted off my jeans, and headed back to campus. My part was done. The moment I stepped back into our dorm room, Sophie scrambled over to me, her eyes wide with anticipation. "Clara, did you spend the money from the envelope?" I gave her a series of enthusiastic nods. "Yep, spent every last cent. Thanks so much for that." A brilliant smile spread across Sophie's face upon hearing my confirmation. "That's wonderful. You went with me to the clinic. It was the least I could do to thank you." With that, she practically skipped to her bed and climbed under the covers. I watched her go, giving her a look she couldn't see. "Friend, your fun is just getting started." Perhaps it was the relief of thinking her plan had worked, or maybe her body was simply exhausted from the day's events, but it wasn't long before Sophie's soft snores filled the room. I, on the other hand, couldn't sleep a wink. I lay in my own bed, scrolling aimlessly on my phone. Just after the clock ticked past midnight, a sudden, unnatural chill swept through the room, making me shiver despite my warm blanket. The dorm room door, which I knew we had locked, creaked open on its own. A thin, shadowy figure of a man appeared silently in the doorway. The figure seemed to sniff the air, then let out a strange, guttural laugh before gliding across the room and climbing directly into Sophie's bed. The next morning, Sophie was slow to wake up. When I saw we were on the verge of being late for our first class, I reached over and tapped on her bed frame, finally startling her awake. "Oh, what happened? Didn't my alarm go off?" she asked, looking disoriented. I shrugged, feigning a helpless expression. "It definitely went off. It was ringing for ages. I just assumed you heard it." Sophie dragged herself out of bed, her face pale and drawn. "I'm so exhausted. Why did I sleep so deeply today?" I put on a concerned face. "You just went through a major medical procedure yesterday. You must be really weak. Maybe you should skip classes for a couple of days and just rest here." But Sophie just looked puzzled, muttering to herself, "That can't be right. I already took care of it." Then she turned her full attention to me. "Clara, are you absolutely positive you spent all of that money yesterday?" I nodded firmly. "Yeah, every penny. Why are you asking? If you're running low on cash, I can send you some." Sophie quickly waved her hands in front of her. No, it's not that. It's nothing." She shook her head as if to clear it. "I still have to go to class. Finals are right around the corner. I can't afford to miss a single lecture." Sophie's academic performance had always been stellar. She'd held the top rank in our program since our first year, though I could honestly never recall seeing her study particularly hard. All through our morning classes, Sophie was clearly not herself. She kept her head down on her desk, looking as if she could fall asleep at any second. When we returned to the dorm for our lunch break, Sophie glanced at her afternoon schedule and sighed with relief. "It's just a big survey course this afternoon, so I'm going to skip it. That professor never takes attendance anyway. I desperately need to get some sleep." But, as fate would have it, that afternoon, for the first time in the entire semester, the professor decided to call on students to answer questions. And out of the 300-plus students in the lecture hall, the first name he called was Sophie's. When he saw she wasn't present, his voice boomed with irritation. "This is the only time all semester I've called on anyone, and I managed to catch an absence. All of her participation points for the course are now gone." When Sophie eventually found out, she rushed to the professor's office to plead her case, but returned a short while later with a long, defeated expression. "It's over. It's completely over. That professor is known for being impossible. I'm going to fail this class." Seeing her so dejected, I felt a flicker of surprise myself, and quietly consulted my father's notes on the spirit I had chosen. The results made me raise my eyebrows. It turned out the old man wasn't just a creep. He was also what old folklore would call a jinx, a magnet for bad luck. This was getting more interesting than I had anticipated. With a jinx attached to her, Sophie was likely in for a very rough patch. For several nights in a row, the ghostly figure appeared punctually after midnight and slipped into Sophie's bed. With each passing day, Sophie's condition visibly worsened. Her face became waxy and pale. She had no energy, and she would become breathless after walking just a few steps across campus. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore and cornered me again. "Clara, you have to tell me the truth. Did you really spend that money or not?" I put on my most helpless expression. "Sophie, I honestly did spend it. What is going on with you?" But she wouldn't let it go, pressing me. "How did you spend it? Tell me exactly what you did." I looked at her with wide, innocent eyes. "I burned it as an offering for my ex-boyfriend," I said with a theatrical sigh. "My ex died in a really awful way. He was secretly seeing more than a dozen girls at once and just running himself into the ground. He ended up dying of exhaustion in some woman's bed. He's probably a restless, lecherous ghost now, unable to move on. Even though I despise him, we were in love once. After I went with you to the clinic, it just made me think of him, so I burned the money you gave me for him. You don't mind that, do you, Sophie? As I finished my story, I had to fight to keep a straight face while watching the color drain from hers. She just stood there, her mouth hanging open, utterly speechless for a long moment before she turned on her heel and fled from the room. That evening, Sophie returned to the dorm with a completely different demeanor, sidling up to me with a wide, artificial smile plastered on her face. Clara, could you tell me your full birth date? You know, the exact time and everything? The question immediately put me on high alert. What do you need that for? I asked, my tone guarded. Sophie giggled a strange, high-pitched sound. Oh, no reason. It's just we've lived together for so long, and I realized I don't even know your real birthday. How can I get you a present? I arched an eyebrow. You can know my birthday, but the exact time of birth seems a bit unnecessary, don't you think? But Sophie persisted, leaning in close and whispering conspiratorially in my ear. You won't believe this, but I know this master fortune teller who is incredibly accurate. I've been seeing him for a while. You've been such a good friend to me. I wanted to help you get a reading, too. See when you'll finally meet someone special. A fortune teller? I thought. You're that predictable? Just then, my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and immediately schooled my features into a bright smile. Oh, Sophie, I don't really buy into that kind of stuff, but since you're being so kind, I should thank you. Forget about finding me a boyfriend, though. Ask the master to tell me when I'm going to get rich. With that, I recited a full birth date for her. Not my own, of course. Sophie eagerly took out a weathered piece of yellow paper and scribbled it down, her smile growing even wider. Oh, right, Clara. There was something else I wanted to ask you. I'm not feeling very well today. Can we maybe turn the lights off and go to bed early? I immediately nodded in agreement. Of course, I'm pretty tired myself and was hoping to get to sleep early anyway. Sophie and I had a two-person room, so there was no one else to consider. Seeing that I had readily agreed, she quickly switched off the lights and climbed into her bed. I lay in my own bed, feigning sleep, but kept my eyes cracked just enough to watch her. The faint glow of her phone screen was visible by her pillow. After a very long time, she silently slipped out of her bed. I quickly shut my eyes completely and began to breathe in a deep, even rhythm. I heard her soft footsteps approach my bedside, pause for a moment, and then move away. I risked opening my eyes again. Sophie was rummaging through my closet. She pulled out one of my coats and then scurried back to her own bed. I knew in that instant what her plan was. Just after midnight, the man reappeared at our door, as he always did, and silently made his way to Sophie's bed. This time, however, he quickly retreated from her bed and vanished as quickly as he had appeared. The next morning, Sophie was up early, looking refreshed and cheerful for the first time in weeks. She tossed the coat onto my bed. Clara, I felt a little cold last night, so I borrowed your coat. You don't mind, do you? I shook my head. Of course not. But Sophie was looking at me with a strange, knowing smile. So, last night, did you happen to dream about your ex-boyfriend? Wow, I didn't realize you were into such old men. How could you stand it? That's so gross. I feigned total confusion. Old man? What are you talking about? I have no idea what you mean. Sophie just smirked. It's okay, you'll understand tonight. With that, she got up and left for her morning class. Today was the final exam for one of our elective courses. While it was rare to fail an elective, this particular professor was notoriously strict and had insisted on a closed-book exam. I glanced over the questions and felt a wave of relief. They were all fairly straightforward, the kind of questions you could answer correctly with just a bit of common sense. I started writing, filling out the pages quickly. It didn't take me long to finish, and I was preparing to hand in my paper. But just as I started to stand, I heard a commotion from the row behind me. What are you doing? Take out your phone. I turned to see the professor standing right next to Sophie's desk. Her face was bright red, and she was desperately clutching her desk drawer, refusing to let him open it. The professor, losing his patience, pried her hand away and pulled a smartphone out of the drawer. I made it very clear at the start of the exam that all phones were to be placed on the podium. Why didn't you hand yours in? Sophie stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. The professor glanced down at her exam paper, his voice rising in anger. Other students have already finished, and your paper is still mostly blank. You're trying to cheat on an exam this easy? Have you even been coming to class? With that, the professor confiscated her phone and her exam booklet, walked to the front of the room, and drew a thick, angry line across her paper with his pen. Cheating on the exam, that's a 0. Sophie began to plead with him, but he didn't even look in her direction. As soon as the bell rang, he gathered the papers and left the classroom. The other students immediately began to whisper. What's going on with Sophie? The questions were so simple. Why would she need to cheat? Yeah, and elective grades don't even count towards scholarship calculations. What was the point? Do you think she cheated to get first place all those other times too? I bet she's done it before. Someone who cheats on an easy elective getting top marks in her major courses? Only an idiot would believe that. Listening to the buzz of conversation, I suppressed a smile, packed up my things, and walked back to the dorm. That jinx was certainly proving to be powerful. Sophie had now failed 2 courses in as many days. Her scholarship for the year was definitely gone. I was relaxing in the dorm, playing a game on my laptop, when the door was kicked open with a loud bang. Sophie stood there, glaring at me with pure fury. Clara Miller, was this your doing? I looked up at her with a manufactured expression of innocence. My doing? Sophie, what on earth are you talking about? She strode into the room, yelling at me. Did you deliberately burn that envelope for some dead ghost? Her voice was shaking with rage. Clara Miller, you are a malicious, evil person. I blinked slowly. What are you saying? I don't understand a word of this. Sophie's mouth worked for a moment, the words seeming to catch in her throat. She pointed a trembling finger at me. If you hadn't burned that envelope, how could I? You are something else, Clara Miller. Just you wait. You are in for it tonight. With that, she stormed over to her bed, turned her back to me, and started furiously tapping on her phone. I watched her, a cold sneer on my lips. In for it? I thought. The one who's in for it tonight is probably you. It soon grew late, reaching 12 o'clock, but I felt wide awake. I knew Sophie wasn't asleep either. It felt as if we were both lying in the dark, waiting for something to arrive. Suddenly, the dorm room door swung open on its own. A gust of frigid wind swept inside, and the temperature in the room dropped instantly. I pulled my blanket up to my chin, but I couldn't stop shivering. I peeked toward the doorway, and the sight that greeted me almost made me scream. The ghostly man who had visited Sophie's bed on previous nights appeared, but this time he was dressed in startlingly bright red clothes. Behind him, 4 short paper-like figures, 2 on each side, were carrying a paper sedan chair. With another blast of cold air, the ghostly figure floated slowly into the dorm, the paper figures bobbing unsteadily behind him. Just as I was trying to figure out what to do, a sinister voice seemed to echo from the air itself. My dear wife, your husband has come to marry you. As soon as the words faded, the chill in the room intensified. The ghost, along with his paper entourage, was moving toward my bed. I quickly pulled the blanket over my head and squeezed my eyes shut as tightly as I could. My dad had always told me that as long as you don't make eye contact with a spirit, it can't truly harm you. To be honest, even though I'd grown up listening to my dad's strange stories, this was the first time I had ever been this close to something so unnatural. I could feel the cold presence drawing nearer and nearer, finally stopping directly over my head. An icy sensation seeped through the blanket, reaching deep into my bones. I felt as if I were frozen solid, completely unable to move. I clenched my jaw, trying my best to stay conscious. After what felt like a lifetime, a cold, eerie voice boomed right next to my ear. My dear wife, look at me. I am your husband. My eyelids began to flutter uncontrollably, as if they were no longer mine to command. They felt like they were about to peel open on their own. Just as I felt them about to lift, the voice spoke again, this time with a note of confusion. Huh? The scent is wrong. This is the wrong person. The moment the voice faded, I felt an instant wave of relief wash over me. My eyes, which had been fighting me just moments before, were suddenly under my control again. I squeezed them shut even tighter. The intense chill began to recede from my body. I let out a long, silent sigh. There were only two of us in this dorm room. If it wasn't me he was looking for, then who could it be? Suddenly, a terrified scream came from the direction of Sophie's bed. No! Don't come over here! You're Clara Miller's ex-boyfriend. Go find her. What are you doing coming after me? The cold voice sounded again. You are my wife. Who else would I be looking for? See, I even brought gifts. Then, a rotten, swampy smell filled the air. Ah, toads, help me! Along with Sophie's frantic screams, I felt an overwhelming wave of drowsiness. My head started to spin, and then everything went black. The next day was Saturday. When I finally opened my eyes, the sun was high in the sky. It was already noon. Sophie was still in bed, unmoving. It wasn't until evening that she finally, wearily, sat up. Her face was a deathly, chalky white, completely devoid of life, like a zombie from a movie. She glared at me, her eyes filled with a venomous hatred. In her current state, she looked more like a ghost than a person. Clara Miller, what in the hell did you do? She hissed. I calmly ate a bite of my takeout. What do you mean, Sophie? I haven't understood a single thing you've said for the past few days. She struggled to get out of her bed, stumbled over to me, and swatted my food container off my desk. Stop pretending, Clara Miller. I arranged a ghost marriage for you. Why did that dead ghost come after me? I didn't want to argue with her, but she had just thrown my dinner on the floor. No one could tolerate that. I slammed my hand on the table. Sophie, shouldn't I be the one asking you that question? I kindly went with you to the clinic, and you repaid me by trying to buy my life force. Do you have any shame at all? I wasn't the one who got you into that mess, so why try to take it out on me? If you had any courage, you would have gone after your phantom boyfriend. Since you were too scared to do that, I could only find an old creep for you to deal with. Sophie trembled with rage, pointing at me, speechless for a long moment. You. I grabbed her pointing finger. Don't you point your filthy finger at me. Dead people have no lifespan left to give. When you try to buy a dead person's life, your own lifespan doesn't increase. It decreases. But it wasn't a total loss for you. You added to that old ghost's spiritual energy, helping to reduce his punishment in the underworld. So now, isn't he going to come and cherish you every single day? Sophie, you should be thanking me. I'm helping you accumulate otherworldly merit. Sophie struggled to free her hand, but she was so weak at this point, she had no strength at all. Not only could she not break free, but she cried out in pain. Clara Miller, let me go! I twisted her fingers just a little. As she yelped, her whole body went limp, and she slumped to the floor. Pain! Clara Miller, you monster! What happened last night? I clearly set up the marriage for you. Why did that ghost come for me? I sneered, released her fingers, and pulled the coat she had worn from my closet, throwing it down at her. Sophie. Oh, Sophie. You really know how to pick your accessories. This coat was my birthday gift to you. Happy birthday. Sophie's eyes widened in horror. What did you just say? A gift? For me? I smirked. That's right. Didn't you see it when you took it? There was a greeting card in the pocket. As I spoke, I pulled a small card from the coat's inner pocket. It read, Happy birthday to my classmate Sophie, and was signed with Sophie's own birth date and time. She looked at me in utter disbelief. You? How did you know my exact birth date and time? I smiled faintly. It was written on the red envelope you gave me, in tiny red print, in the bottom right corner. Did you forget? It finally clicked for her. She glared at me, her voice trembling. Clara Miller, you planned this from the very beginning, didn't you? You deliberately left only that one coat in your closet. You did it on purpose to hurt me. I scoffed. Lady, let's be very clear about who is hurting whom here. You were the one trying to trap me in a ghost marriage with that disgusting old man. It just so happens that you took the coat I had already designated as a gift for you and ended up marrying him yourself. This is a classic case of the biter bit. What does any of that have to do with me? Sophie stared at me fiercely. But he was your ex-boyfriend. I was just helping you finish your unresolved ghost human romance. What's so wrong with that? I burst out laughing. Ex-boyfriend? Please, I've been single my entire life. Where would I even get an ex-boyfriend? Do you honestly think I would ever fall for something like that? That was just some random, nasty old ghost I found in the cemetery. Sophie's mouth twitched and she sat there on the floor, completely defeated. I looked down at her with contempt. You have time to argue with me here, but you might want to spend that time thinking about your own situation. A lecherous ghost married to a jinx. Tisk tisk. Sophie, oh Sophie, you have a lot to look forward to. My words seemed to snap her out of her stupor. She glared at me one last time, struggled to her feet, and spat, "You just wait," before turning and leaving the dorm. That night, Sophie didn't come back. The next morning, I called my dad and told him everything that had happened over the last week. He told me to find the protective talisman he had given me and burn it. Even though the spirit wasn't targeting me, being in such close proximity to it could still affect my own health and energy. I did as he instructed, but to my surprise, just as the last of the paper turned to ash, the dorm room door was pushed open. Sophie walked in, followed by our academic advisor. Sophie pointed a finger at me and announced to the advisor, "Professor, Clara Miller is performing superstitious rituals in the dorm room." The advisor frowned and walked toward me. "Clara Miller, what are you doing?" I hadn't expected Sophie to stoop this low. I frowned and said slowly, "Professor, I was just burning a piece of paper for fun." Before the advisor could respond, Sophie shrieked, "Burning paper for fun? You were burning a talisman, weren't you? Clara Miller, I knew there was something wrong with you." "Professor, Clara has been talking to me about things like buying lives and ghost marriages for the past few days. I suspect she's involved in some kind of superstitious scam." Hearing this, the advisor's face grew dark. "Clara Miller, what is the meaning of this? Why have you been telling Sophie these things?" My mind raced, and I said to the advisor, "Professor, I was just telling her stories. Burning paper in the dorm was my mistake, and I won't do it again. I'm sorry." The advisor clearly didn't believe my flimsy excuse. His tone was unfriendly. "Telling stories? How old are you? Clara Miller, what exactly are you up to?" Sophie chimed in smugly from the side. "Professor, don't listen to her lies. She's been going on about old ghosts and jinxes. It's definitely not just storytelling. Besides, who burns talismans while telling stories?" "Professor, Clara Miller's father is a scam artist who does fortune-telling. She must have learned it all from him and is now trying to scam her classmates out of their money. She even scammed a red envelope full of money from me." At Sophie's words, the advisor's expression became even uglier. Looking at her triumphant face, I almost had to laugh. This girl would really do anything to ruin me. Since you want to play dirty, I thought, don't blame me for fighting back. I pretended to be flustered. "Professor, I didn't scam anyone. Since it has come to this, I'll just tell you the truth. Yes, my dad is a folklorist, and he taught me some methods to ward off evil spirits. I was burning that paper today to help Sophie exorcise an evil spirit that's been bothering her." Hearing me say this, Sophie's expression changed instantly. "Exorcise a spirit for me? What's wrong with me that I would need you to do that?" I smiled mysteriously. "You were screaming in your sleep last night. It's obvious you were possessed by something. I'm not lying, Professor. If you don't believe me, you can ask the students in the neighboring rooms. It was so loud they definitely heard it." A crowd of curious students had already gathered outside our open door. Hearing my suggestion, the advisor turned and scanned the crowd, his gaze landing on Sarah from the room next to ours. "Sarah, tell me, what did you hear last night?" Sarah, put on the spot, hesitated and stammered for a moment. "Professor, the advisor glared. "Tell the truth. Did you hear any strange noises last night?" Sarah bit her lip, her face flushing, and after a long pause, she finally nodded. "Professor, I did hear Sophie screaming yesterday." Sophie's eyes widened. What nonsense are you talking about? When did I scream?" Before Sarah could answer, several other students chimed in. "I heard it too. I thought you two were watching a horror movie. The screams were terrifying." Yes. I had just fallen asleep and it startled me awake." I heard it too. It was so scary. Is Sophie really possessed by a ghost? Sophie's face turned beet red as she stammered, "What ghost possession? I was just having a nightmare." Then she turned her attack back to me. "Clara Miller, you scammed a red envelope from me before. You said it was some life-buying money. I know your family isn't well off. If you can't afford to eat, just say so and I'll treat you. But you can't use these superstitious scams to trick people. Professor, I suggest you expel this fraud, Clara Miller, so she doesn't harm any other students." Hearing this, the advisor's critical gaze fell on me again. I smirked. "Sophie, since you've said this much, I have no reason to cover for you anymore. Professor, Sophie did give me a red envelope, but it wasn't for buying a life. It was hush money." "Hush money?" the advisor repeated, looking at me doubtfully. I smiled faintly. "Yes. Sophie found out she was pregnant and her boyfriend was unreachable. She was too scared to tell her family, so she begged me to go with her to the clinic for an abortion. She gave me the red envelope as hush money to keep quiet about it. Sophie, I really didn't expect you to twist things like this. In that case, there's no need for me to hide the truth for you any longer." As soon as I finished speaking, the students gathered outside, erupted in a flurry of hushed conversation. I looked at Sophie's scarlet face and continued. "For the past few days, Sophie has been tormented by the spirit of the child she aborted. That's why she's been having such terrible luck. Sophie, whether you believe in superstitions or not, I was being kind by trying to help you, and you turned around and stabbed me in the back. That's not a very decent thing to do." Hearing this, the students' whispers grew louder. "Wow, Sophie always seems like such a good girl. She was actually pregnant. No wonder she got caught cheating on the exam. So she was being haunted by a little ghost. Serves her right. The baby in her belly was a life too. How could she just get rid of it like that? Tisk, tisk. I really didn't expect the top student in our year to do something like this." Sophie's eyeballs looked like they were about to bulge out of their sockets, her gaze practically shooting fire at me. She pointed at me, stammering for a long time before she suddenly lunged forward. "Clara Miller, you liar! You're slandering my reputation. I'll kill you." Several students standing nearby quickly grabbed her and held her back. I stood my ground, saying calmly, "Whether I'm slandering you or not can be easily proven by checking your medical records." "Sophie, you have no shame, and yet you still expect me to protect your reputation? Dream on." The advisor, seeing the situation spiraling completely out of control, shouted sternly, "Enough! You two, bring your parents to my office tomorrow morning. We need to have a proper discussion about this. What is all this chaos?" With that, he told the other students to disperse and then turned and left. Sophie followed him, glaring fiercely back at me over her shoulder. "Clara Miller, just you wait." "Wait! I will dot." After she left, I calmly took out my phone and called my dad. "Dad, my advisor wants to see my parents. Can you come to the school tomorrow?" The next day, my dad arrived at the school gate early. I led him to the advisor's office where Sophie was already waiting. Seeing us enter, Sophie looked my dad up and down with a disdainful sneer. "Clara Miller, your scammer dad doesn't seem to have scammed very much money, huh? He's dressed like such a hick." I looked at the old worn coat my dad was wearing and said to him with a sigh, "Dad, you could have dressed a little nicer. You make so much money, why do you live so frugally?" My dad just grinned at me. "Oh, I'm used to these old clothes. As long as my daughter isn't suffering, that's all that matters." "Professor, what did Clara do wrong? Why call her parents in all of a sudden? Clara has never been called to the principal's office in her entire life." Before the advisor could speak, Sophie said arrogantly, "Your daughter is practicing black magic and hurting people at school. She's about to be expelled." Ha! Like father, like daughter. A big scammer raises a little scammer. Today we're taking you both down. Hearing Sophie's words, I instantly saw red. She could insult me, but how dare she insult my dad? I strode over to her and slapped her hard across the face. "Sophie, watch your mouth. Who are you calling a scammer? For years, it's always been other people seeking out my dad's help. He has never actively solicited anyone. Don't think you can do whatever you want just because your father donated a building to the school. A piece of trash like you who cheats on exams has no right to criticize me. I'm telling you, if you dare call my dad a scammer one more time, I will rip your mouth apart. I'd been taking Taekwondo since I was a kid, so that slap was not light. It stunned Sophie into silence for a good while. The advisor was also shocked by my actions and quickly yelled, Clara Miller, what are you doing? Hitting someone right in front of a professor? That's going too far. I turned and glared at the advisor. Professor, if someone insulted your parents to your face, would you hit them or not? The advisor was taken aback by my question, and when he spoke again, his tone was noticeably weaker. Even so, you can't hit someone in my office. All right, let's talk about you practicing these rituals today. Sophie's father was a well-known and wealthy businessman in the area and a major donor to the university. She dared to bring the advisor into this because she was clearly relying on her father's influence. I rolled my eyes. It was agreed that both sets of parents would come. My dad is here. Where's hers? Sophie was still dazed. The advisor spoke for her. Mr. Davenport is a very busy man, unlike some idle people. He'll be here shortly. Let's talk about your problem first. What exactly were you doing burning that paper in the dorm yesterday? I just shrugged. Professor, let's just wait until Sophie's father arrives. At this point, Sophie had recovered. Her face flushed red where I'd hit her. She pointed at me and cursed. Clara Miller, you bastard, how dare you hit me? I have never been hit in my entire life. Fine, just you wait. When my dad gets here, we'll see how he deals with you. I glared back at her, and she immediately shrank away. My dad, seeing the tense atmosphere, tried to smooth things over. Oh, Clara, what are you doing? How can you bully your classmate? Professor, this is all my fault. I shouldn't have told Clara all that nonsense. I was just telling her stories for fun. I didn't expect her to take it so seriously. Professor, just let it go. Don't take it to heart. And young lady, he said to Sophie, are you okay? Clara bullying you is her fault. I'll definitely teach her a lesson when we get home. My dad's words only made Sophie angrier. She bullied me? The great Sophie Davenport bullied by this country bumpkin? You really think highly of yourselves? Fine. I'm calling the police right now and having them arrest both of you. Clara Miller, this one slap is enough to get you sent to jail. If you don't get on your knees and apologize to me today, I will absolutely not let this go. As Sophie took out her phone to dial, a man's voice came from the doorway. Sophie, what's going on? After seeing who it was, the advisor practically tripped over himself to greet the man. Mr. Davenport, you're here. It's nothing serious, just some students messing around. I could have handled it myself, but Sophie insisted you come. Sophie immediately rushed toward her father as if he were her savior. Dad, this bitch is practicing superstitious rituals in the dorm, and she even dared to hit me. Mr. Davenport looked at me fiercely, then his gaze fell on my dad. Suddenly, his entire expression changed. He looked at my dad with shock and disbelief. Sophie didn't notice her father's reaction and was still rambling on. And Clara Miller's dad is just some hick who practices scams. I'm going to call the police and have them both arrested. Suddenly, Mr. Davenport pushed Sophie away forcefully and roared at her, Call the police? What police are you calling? You might as well call them to arrest your own father. The sudden turn of events left Sophie completely bewildered. The advisor was also dumbfounded. Sophie's father, Mr. Davenport, quickly walked over to my dad, a broad, sycophantic smile on his face as he extended his hand. Oh, Master Miller! I really didn't expect to run into you here of all places. My daughter is ignorant and spoke nonsense, offending you. Please don't take it to heart. My dad chuckled and shook Mr. Davenport's hand. Mr. Davenport, you're being too formal, so this is your daughter? We're all on the same side here. It's not good for things to get so ugly. Let's settle whatever it is privately and not trouble the professor, all right? Hearing my dad, Mr. Davenport nodded repeatedly. He then turned to the advisor. Professor Chen, today's incident is all my daughter's fault. Just pretend nothing happened. We can discuss anything else in private. With that, he patted Sophie's shoulder. Sophie, quickly, apologize to your Uncle Miller. Tears streamed down Sophie's face as she looked at her dad in disbelief. Seeing her motionless, Mr. Davenport patted her again, more forcefully this time. Didn't you hear me? Hurry up and apologize to Uncle Miller. Sophie swallowed hard, gritted her teeth, and mumbled to my dad, Uncle Miller, I'm sorry. My dad still looked at her with a gentle smile. Oh, Mr. Davenport, what are you doing? It's just a misunderstanding between the girls. Why apologize to me? It's not necessary at all. Mr. Davenport paused, then patted Sophie again. Ah, yes. Quickly, apologize to your classmate. Sophie clenched her jaw tightly, and after a long moment, she squeezed out from between her teeth. I'm sorry. I just rolled my eyes at her. I can't accept your apology. Weren't you just about to call the police to have me arrested? And didn't you say you wouldn't let me off if I didn't kowtow and apologize? Mr. Davenport froze again, his face darkening as he gritted his teeth and said to Sophie, Kneel down and apologize to your classmate. Hearing that, my dad quickly stopped him. All right, Mr. Davenport, what is all this? We're all family here. Why make it like this? It's just a misunderstanding between children. Once it's cleared up, they'll still be good classmates, right? Mr. Davenport glared at Sophie. Hurry up and thank Uncle Miller. Sophie lowered her head and muttered, Thank you, Uncle Miller. Hearing this, Mr. Davenport finally breathed a sigh of relief and said to my dad, Master Miller, I've booked a private room at the finest restaurant in town for lunch. Would you do me the honor of joining me? This was our fault from the beginning. Please consider it my apology to you and your daughter. It was only after having lunch with Mr. Davenport that I understood the whole story. It turned out that his company had recently run into a series of inexplicable problems. My dad is a renowned, if low-key, expert in his field, a respected consultant for many powerful people. Mr. Davenport had only managed to get an introduction to my dad through multiple connections and was about to beg him for help. And earlier, when Sophie had been looking for a way to arrange a ghost marriage, she had unknowingly contacted one of my dad's apprentices. That apprentice, my senior, happened to know that Sophie was my roommate and had sent me the warning text message. That's how I was able to turn the tables on her. After Sophie had been trapped in the marriage herself, she had asked her dad for help, who in turn had sought out my dad, which is how the problem was resolved for her. However, Sophie had no idea it was my dad who had helped her, which is why she had been so arrogant. She had just had an abortion, had her life force drained by a ghost, and had been trapped in a spiritual marriage. Her health was in shambles, and she was listless and confused every day. Final exams were just around the corner. I was studying in the library one afternoon when I received another text message. It was from the same apprentice. After reading it, I burst out laughing right there in the quiet study hall. I never would have thought this incredible stroke of luck would fall right into my lap. I quickly called my dad. When I returned to the dorm that night, Sophie, for a change, greeted me with a smile and a cup of bubble tea. Clara Miller, I was wrong about everything that happened before. I've suffered so much already. Please, can you forgive me? I smiled back at her. Sophie, I'm so happy to hear you say that. Your dad and my dad are friends, and we're roommates. There was no reason for us to be so tense. With that, I took the bubble tea from her and took a sip. Why is this a bit bitter? A flicker of something unreadable crossed Sophie's face. Oh, you said you were trying to lose weight, so I ordered it with half sugar. I smiled and nodded, then said to her, Hey, Sophie, why don't you go ask my dad for a proper reading? I see you've been having such bad luck lately. Maybe it's because your fate is just not good. Let my dad find a way to change it for you. Your dad and my dad are so close, he won't even charge you. Sophie's gaze shifted away from mine. Ah, well, forget it. I'll figure something out myself. Clara, finish your bubble tea. I waited in line for a long time for that. Okay, I said, and chugged the entire drink in front of her. As the cup emptied, the smile on Sophie's face grew wider and wider. That night, I was sleeping soundly when I was woken by the smell of something burning. I cracked an eye open and saw Sophie kneeling in the middle of our room, hands clasped together, muttering something over a smoldering piece of paper on the floor. A faint smile touched my lips. I rolled over and went back to sleep. The next morning, I felt weak all over, as if all the strength had been drained from my body. I couldn't get out of bed. I said weakly to Sophie, Sophie, I feel so sick. I think I have a fever. Today's lecture is a big one. I'm not going to make it. If the professor takes attendance, can you answer for me? Sophie, however, shedding her usual fatigue, walked up to my bed full of energy and said with a grin, Sure, don't worry about a thing. Just get some rest. Watching her walk out of the dorm, full of vitality, I quickly sat up. I took out the talisman my dad had left me, burned it to ash, mixed it into a cup of water, and drank it down. A raw, metallic taste scraped down my throat, but within minutes, the feeling of weakness completely vanished. I felt like I had been reborn. I grabbed my textbook, walked to the lecture hall, and sat in the very last row. The professor didn't take attendance. Just as the class was about to end, Sophie suddenly raised her hand. Professor, I don't think Clara Miller is here today. Perhaps you should call the roll. The professor looked at her puzzled and was about to do so when I stood up. Professor, I'm here, right here. Watching me wave energetically at him, Sophie's jaw nearly hit the floor. The professor glared at Sophie, made a note of her name, and left the room. When I got back to the dorm that night, Sophie looked at me in disbelief. How did you go to class? I rolled my eyes at her. Why couldn't I go to class? You, on the other hand, said you'd answer for me, but then tried to stab me in the back. Sophie, you are just pathetic. You, she shrieked. She grabbed her suitcase from under her bed and snarled, I'm not staying in this dorm anymore, before storming out. Soon it was time for final exams. I originally felt I wasn't fully prepared and was a bit worried. But to my amazement, the exam questions covered exactly the material I had happened to review. I was overjoyed and wrote furiously, finishing every question with time to spare. I peeked over at Sophie. Her face was flushed, she was sweating, and she was staring around the room with a look of helpless panic. The 2 days of exams ended quickly. I felt confident. It looked like I might even get first place this time, maybe even win the scholarship. The results came out a week later. As I had hoped, I had surprisingly gotten first place in our year. Sophie, on the other hand, had failed 2 more subjects. However, the bad news for her didn't stop there. While I was in the dorm packing my things to go home for the break, Sophie burst in, crying, clutching her phone. Dad, how could this happen? Didn't Master Miller already solve it for you? How could... The phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. She slumped down after it. I whistled a cheerful tune, ignoring her, and answered a call from my own dad. Hey, Dad, what's up? The company you invested in went public? Congratulations, CEO Miller. Doesn't that make me a rich kid now? See, Dad, you just needed a little push from fate. When I get home, I want to drive a sports car. Ha 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 ha. Before I could hang up, Sophie pounced on me, knocking me to the ground. Clara Miller, why? Why did my dad go bankrupt while your dad became a big boss? Why? I looked at her twisted, tear-stained face, sneered, and with a flick of my wrist, threw her off me. Why? You should ask yourself that. Don't you remember what you did to me that night? Sophie's eyes widened. What did I do? I sneered. You swapped our fates, remember? She looked at me, completely incredulous. How would you know? Looking at her clueless expression, I found it almost funny. My dad is an expert in these things. The bubble tea you gave me? I knew the moment I tasted it that it had talisman ash in it. Tisk tisk, Sophie. To be capable of something as malicious as a fate-swapping ritual? You're really something else. Sophie's mouth twitched and she roared at me. Yes, I did swap our fates, so what? Why have I been so unlucky lately? Why was I haunted by that ghost? Why did I get caught cheating? Clara Miller, no matter how capable your dad is, he's still just a hick from the countryside. The unlucky one should be you, not me. I just can't stand your smug, hypocritical act. I wanted to transfer all this bad luck to you, so what? I burst out laughing. Sister, thank you so much. Your bad luck was just a temporary consequence of being haunted by that jinx. Didn't you really know? You were born with the luck of a once-in-a-century koi fish. Why do you think your dad's business succeeded so easily? Why do you think you got first place in your exams so effortlessly year after year? Why do you think you always got the scholarships? It's because you are a human good luck charm, but I really never expected you to be foolish enough to actually swap your coy fish luck with me. Ha 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 ha, little girl, it seems the power of that luck was too much for you to handle. Sophie was completely dumbfounded. You? This? How is this possible? How? I sneered. Sophie, although you were born with incredible luck, your heart is rotten. Even with that kind of fortune, you can't handle it, and sooner or later, you would have suffered a backlash from your own actions. Swapping your fate with mine was perhaps the only truly right thing you've ever done. With that, I laughed again and threw the suitcase from my bed directly into the trash can. My dad's a rich man now, so I should start acting the part, right? Time for a new set of everything. Thinking this, I turned my head and looked at Sophie, who was still dazed on the floor. Hey, I have something to ask you. How does one be a good rich kid? I'm new to this, so I don't have much experience. I still need to learn from you, the former rich kid. By the way, if you want, I can also teach you some ways to save money. Hey, Sophie, don't fall asleep. Say something. Hey. Hey?